Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another week. I am glad to see you if I'm going to see you in person this week. If not, I hope you are doing well as usual, learning online. We're going to do things a little bit differently than I had planned for this week since some of us are coming back in person. I have a student from Shepherd. Her name is Mrs. Bittner, who had a lesson planned for you if everyone was remote. But since we've had some changes here at the last minute, I am going to have her save that for next week. So we're going to do a 9 weeks review this week. We're going to do a little project to go over several of the elements of art and to introduce space. So let's get started. As you can see, I'm in Van Gogh's bedroom today. That's my background. I'm going to bring up my slides and we will get moving because we're just going to kind of review some things that we've already talked about. So then we can just get to our project today and then we'll say what we were going to do this week for next. All right. You should see my screen and you should see the awesome twosome, Molly and Maggie, hanging out. Let's bring them back up here. Quickly. Yes, there they are, just hanging out, having a good time. Molly's on the cabinets, Maggie's on top of the curtains. And they like to hang out there and just stay for a while. It's hard to stop them. They're into a climbing phase, which is okay. It's not as destructive when they climb as it is when they just want to tear stuff up. So I'm kind of okay with it for right now. But anyway, there's your kitten update. Let's go over the elements of art that we've learned about very quickly, and then we're going to start our project. So color is the way light reflects off a surface. That was the first one we learned about with Kandinsky. Value is lightness or darkness of a surface, and it can help us show shape and form. Line is a path in one direction. They don't have to be vertical and horizontal. They can be squiggly lines, dotted lines, spiral lines, zigzag lines, all kinds of lines. Shape is flat and enclosed. We have our geometric shapes, which we find in math. We have our organic shapes, which we find in nature. We have form, which is when we take our shapes and put them together to make a 3D object, even if that 3D object is on paper. Then we have from last week texture, and oh, how I love texture. Making things look how they feel. That is fun. Make sure you do that lesson. And then what we're going to learn about a little bit this week and next is space. Showing how far things are away, showing where things are in relation to each other. And then we've talked about before a little bit about positive and negative space. We'll get into a little bit about that today, but we'll also be getting into it more next week with Mrs. Bittner. So we want to get to this project that we're going to do, because I said this is kind of like a 9 weeks review, just to kind of wrap things up since the 9 weeks ends in the middle of the week this week. Let's learn about some words that you're going to hear used a little bit more for the rest of the year. We're going to start talking about drawing in perspective. In perspective, you might have heard that word in reading before, but it's a view or it's a viewpoint. When you show 1 point perspective in your work, you're showing how things get smaller as they get farther away from one vanishing point. Now, what is a vanishing point? A vanishing point is the point on the horizon where lines seem to meet. What's a horizon? Well, You must ask. A horizon is where the sky appears to meet land. Maybe you've seen the ocean before, where it seems like the water is touching the sky. It's not really touching the sky, but from our viewpoint, it looks like it is. So when we draw in 1-point perspective, we show how things get smaller from one vanishing point on the horizon. Let's look at a couple quick examples. So like the picture you see behind me, which for some reason got flipped around behind me in my background, but here it looks okay. The vanishing point is the point from which the horizon is in the picture. Now, the horizon's kind of hard to see in this picture because, it's not the floor. It's at eye level, but the points or the objects in the artwork get larger the closer they are to us. And they are the closer they are to the vanishing point, the smaller they are. So this picture on the wall is smaller than the foot of the bed, which is closer to us. In this other artwork, we see our vanishing point is right about, let me bring my pointer up, is right about here. And there's my horizon. Now you notice my horizon where the sky appears to meet the land. It is a horizontal line running across the work. And then we have our what are called frontal lines that come out from that vanishing point. That shows our 1-point perspective. From that 1 point, this is how things are getting farther away from us or closer to us. So this young person that is looking down off the bridge is a lot closer than these people that are a little bit further away. And especially these people that are even further away and towards the background. You'll hear about that more next week too. Foreground, middle ground, and background. You're also going to hear me talk a little bit about them today as we begin our artwork. So let's jump in to what we're going to do. And I'm going to bring my screen back to me for just a moment. Okay. So what you're going to need to get started, you're going to need your something to write on. You're going to need your something to write with. You'll need your something to color with. Remember, it doesn't matter what I'm using. You can use whatever you want. I'm going to use crowns again today because I am really enjoying using crayon right now. And I'm usually a colored pencil person. So it's up to you. And then you may want to get this started for what I'm going to show you how to get a 1-point perspective drawing started. You may want a ruler or a straight edge. And something that's a straight edge means that it's just got a straight edge. It could be a book. It could be a notepad. Anything that's got a flat, hard edge that you could trace, okay, to get that straight line. We'll make it work, okay? So what I am going to do now, I am going to turn my camera from my iPad on so that we can get this started. What we're going to make, this is what's called a directed drawing. That means you're going to make it along with me. A lot of things we are kind of directed right now, but you'll see as we go. I need you to follow the directions to create this example of the different elements. Okay, so I'm going to bring up my movie recording. And I'll just give you a heads up. What we're making is very seasonal. So I think you'll enjoy it because we are in the fall season. Okay, and I am waiting to see. Oops. I'm waiting to see my camera come up just to make sure. There we go. I see it now. It's hiding. All right, so you should see my hand just to make sure that everything is working. Okay, so I have my paper and I'm going to hold it in the landscape mode. Okay, so it's going long ways. I'm not going to hold it in portrait. And I am first going to take my straight edge or my ruler, whichever you have. And you know what? If we don't do this perfectly, it's okay. All right. But what we're going to do is we're going to draw our horizon line. Now, to draw your horizon, try to get it towards the center of your paper for this. But if it's down here a little further, or if it's up here, it's okay. Don't worry. Don't be so worried about erasing. I'm going to put mine right about here. I'm going to draw straight across. Guess what? When you draw straight across, you have made a horizon line. Yep. Now, what we need to do, this is a 1-point perspective. Okay, so we need to find a point in the center of that line. Now, I've got a ruler here, so it makes it a little bit easier. So this is an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. So I am going to find about my halfway point, which is about right here. And I'm going to put a very small point. Okay, very small point. Barely can see it on the screen. Whoops, my hand kind of froze there for a second. All right, you can do the same if you don't have a ruler and you're just guesstimating, that's okay. So put a point towards the center of your horizon line, and that is your vanishing point. That means all the lines we're about to make, or all the points that we're going to make, are going to get smaller going to that point. All right, so now we're going to do what's called some frontal lines. They also have another fancy word. We're going to call them frontal lines because that's easy for us all to remember. All right, and these need to be done very lightly. Okay, and you'll see why. But we're going to draw our lines to our vanishing point. So there's my first line. And I'm going to turn my ruler, and I'm doing these on a diagonal, so I'm making lines. We already talked about line this year. So I'm going to make another line. Okay, oops, that one's not perfect. Well, guess what? I'm okay with that. Does not need to be perfect. And I'm going to turn my ruler, and I'm going to look at my screen there just to make sure I'm getting it about right. Remember, keep these kind of light. I would draw them lighter than what mine are because I don't want you to have to do a lot of erasing. I just want you to be able to see on the screen. And you're trying to make them kind of equal on each side, but if it's not perfect, we're okay with that. Then you're going to do it again. So I've got several frontal lines going to my vanishing point. Let's put in a couple more. Don't worry about it not being perfect. No erasing. Just learn to say, that's good enough. Not that we shouldn't do our best work. Is there some things you just need to say, that's good enough. All right, so there we go. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sections. I'm doing that. And if you see there, I kind of make the shape of a triangle. And I have my diagonal lines that meet at my horizontal lines vanishing point. Okay, so we're making it's gonna be fall. It's gonna be a fall picture, okay? Gotta take my word for it, okay? So let's start up here, and we're gonna start combining some of the other elements of art. I'm gonna make some very light, wavy lines. They're gonna be my clouds. And I'm gonna kind of make some larger ones. And then the closer I get to my vanishing point, even though I didn't draw lines up here, my clouds are gonna get a little bit smaller. Okay, see how lightly I did that and how they don't have to be perfect and yours don't even have to look like mine. Okay, so I've got my clouds in the sky. Let's color the sky a little bit here. So I've got my clouds and I don't want to color over my clouds. Okay, but I've got them in there. But what I want you to do is let's start coloring in the sky. It's kind of funny how I have my iPad set up is that it clunks me in the head when I do this. So I'm going to try very hard to hold my head up and out of the way. So let's color in our sky together. Seriously, sometimes when I'm coloring funny, I'm just kind of make things at an odd angle. It's because I'm trying to avoid getting clunked in the head by my iPad when it's on its mount. Okay, and I'm trying to use those small circular motions. And you know what? If you wanted to do a sunset sky, you could do a sunset sky. You do not have to do a bright blue sky. I just got an idea for something I'm going to show you in just a second. But you know, these shapes that I made here for my clouds, what are they called when they're in nature and they're not perfect geometric shapes? They are organic. Very good, very good, very good. I'm going to pretend you all said that at the same time. All right, so I'm coloring in my bright blue sky. And what you can do is you can make a gradient when you do this by first coloring in, just kind of get like a base color of blue down. But if you look at the sky, the closer you get to the horizon, it gets lighter. It does. So after I color this in, I'm going to add a darker color to it and make a gradient. Remember when we talked about that? Oh, you know what? I colored over where I was going to put my great idea. What do you do when you colored over where you're going to put your great idea? Well, you know what? I'm going to make it work. I may have to do a little bit different color, but I'm still going to try it. See there? I'm not going to start over. Starting over is not necessary all the time. Now, there's sometimes I got to start over when I'm drawing, when I'm doing illustrations, because I will draw something way off center, and if I erased it, I'm just going to make such a big mess. But most of the time, we can make everything work. And we're the only ones that'll know the difference. Okay, so I'm coloring in my sky. Try to keep those motions circular. I hope you've had a chance to go out and enjoy this beautiful weather that we've had over the past couple days here this week. It's almost felt like a late summer, except at night. It gets a little chilly at night. It's because the sun's setting earlier and we're getting further away from the sun the closer we get to winter. So if I wanted to make this a gradient, I'm still going to try to go back and put my idea in. I would take a darker shade of blue, or you can just press harder with the shade that you did have, even if you're using colored pencil. And up here closer to the top of my page, I would go over it. A little bit darker, but I'm not going to use it all the way down the page. I want them to kind of blend together. And actually, if I would do this again, I think I might try a darker blue. That's okay. We learn different things by trying different things. Like I am trying to use crayon a little bit more. Okay, if I have a little bit more time later, I'm going to go back and I'm going to make that a little bit deeper blue. I'm going to keep the lighter blue that I used. And then if I want to continue that value, I can put a little bit of darker blue at the top. And then to give my cloud some texture, remember we learned about that word before? What do I want? Is that a lighter? Oh, I'm gonna use that color. Here. I might use a gray color to give my clouds some texture to show that they're fluffy. And I might add some gray, especially at the bottom. And you know what, if you're drawing clouds in a sunset, we'll have to do that sometime, do clouds in a sunset. I always make them dark. Always make the clouds dark in the sunset because they're, you know, they're not going to be white and puffy when it's almost nighttime. Almost like a like a grayish blue, I would make them, or even a purplish color to make the clouds. We will definitely have to do some sunset drawing. So we're going to do a nature unit. We look at landscapes and talk about some artists that just drew things out inside. Okay, so we've got this much done on our directed drawing. All right, so we've got some gray added to our clouds. All right, so let's talk about this. Now, I was going to use my knowledge of shape and form, and I was going to put a little building, and you could draw it however you'd like. You know, I wish I hadn't done this over top. I wish I weren't doing this over top of the sky, but I can still make it work. So I'm using my knowledge of shape and form to take my lines and my shapes and combine them to make a 3D object. And when I'm making this, I'm trying to make a barn. It may not be perfect, but I'm using very simple shapes. I might add a silo. You ever seen a silo? I live close to a farm. I walk by it every evening when I go for a walk. So I'm going to add, whoops, my screen froze a little bit. Hello. Hopefully that comes back. There we go. But you should see there, I see that it's still frozen. There we go. You should see my very small, at the top of my vanishing point, barn and silo in the distance. And I'm going to go ahead and color that in just so I have it done now. I'm going to use my knowledge of shape. I'm sorry, not shape, value. I'm not going to color it solid, my silo. I'm going to color a little bit gray, but I'm going to show some places on it that are getting some more light. And I would probably do it even lighter color than this if I hadn't colored the sky blue already. But that's okay. You see, you make things work when you're an artist. For being creative, and being creative and using your brain is good. Takes your mind off the things that are bugging you. All right, and then I'm gonna color the roof in. I'm gonna leave some spaces in it where I don't color it in solid so that I can go back in with a gray. Maybe show that it's getting more light in certain areas than others. And maybe if you want to draw, or maybe you don't want to draw any houses or any buildings in your picture, that's okay. I'm going to just color the barn back in my development, or that I can see from my development, actually is red. It's like the classic barn. You may live on a farm or live somewhere close to a farm, and you may see a site like this. Okay, so I've got I'm using form I'm trying to be a little bit neater with my crayons and not throw them all over the place like I do sometimes when I'm drawing with you. Add a little brown to it. I make my barn door brown too. So I've got my little barn in the background. And if I wanted to make one side stand out, make it a little bit darker than the other, I could do that. That would add more value to it. Okay, so now I've got my field, and this is where we're going to be a little seasonal. Okay, because we're going to draw some pumpkins, okay? Now, don't say I can't draw pumpkins. We did pumpkins before, but they were more abstract. They were more folk art. So these pumpkins are going to be a little more realistic, all right? Or they can be as realistic as you'd like them to be. So I'm going to take my pencil, and I am lightly going to sketch a circle. And then I'm going to build out from that circle with a curved line. I'm going to add another curved line, and another curved line, and another curved line on the side of that. And I've got myself a pumpkin. And I'm going to give my pumpkin a stem. And across from that, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to draw another circular shape. It can be kind of oval shaped if you prefer. And I'm going to draw another line out. and another line out, curved line, another curved line out. Now I'm using very soft, feathery marks because I'm planning on coloring these, and I don't want them to kind of be in the way. And I'm doing the same thing over here. Start with that oval shape. Curved lines around it. Curved lines around it. Give it a stem. Now I'm making these a little, as I go up the side here, maybe a little bit smaller. This is going to be the largest pumpkin because it's closest to me, and these two are going to be a little bit larger, but this is where I'm going to put my perspective in. The further I get away from the one that's closest to me, they need to be smaller because they're getting closer to the vanishing point. So I'm going to put another pumpkin in. And pumpkins are all shapes and sizes, so if you want to make your pumpkins look a little bit different than mine, go right ahead. If all the pumpkins in the world looked exactly the same, it'd be kind of boring. All right, let's go over here. See, I'm gonna make this one a little bit different. It's gonna be a little bit taller, not so plump. Maybe that up here. Ooh. These are those funky looking pumpkins. That's like, what? It's not a pumpkin. I like the pumpkins in the gourds that have all the knobs on them, all the knots on them. Like, they kind of remind me of warts. They're kind of usually the more ornamental gourds and pumpkins you see. I like those. I like the texture of them. Okay, so I've got my first set of pumpkins, and now they're going to get smaller at the closer we get to our vanishing point because they're getting further away from us. So you can add, and they don't have to be, it's perfectly lined up, okay? So I'm going to draw this one maybe a little bit off to the side because not everything in nature is perfectly lined up in a row, unless you want yours to be that way. But it's smaller, and there's no one say, but how do I know how much smaller? It doesn't matter. We are just going to make it smaller. Don't have to be very particular. See, this one actually was a little bit smaller than this one. That's okay. But we're using these lines, these guides, these frontal lines to help us keep them in perspective, that they should be further away and therefore not as big. So start with your oval and add your curved lines to the outside of it. I'm going all the way around. And I know you might think, but this is kind of October. No, it's still fall, you all. We have this kind of in-between time before the holidays, the winter holidays, and it's still fall. Okay, so I'm making my pumpkins smaller the closer I get to my vanishing point. So I'm going to add one more to between each of my frontal lines, and they're getting a lot smaller, aren't they? And don't worry, we're not done. You may have already been to a pumpkin patch or a farm this fall. Maybe you went in a corn maze, but that would be fun. Maybe you picked out a pumpkin. Maybe you carved pumpkins. Anybody like to carve pumpkins? And you can always add some random ones. They don't have to have exactly 3 in a row. Like I might add another one back here and back here, just if I want to. They can be really tiny. But as you see, my pumpkins that are closer to me are larger, and the further away we get to our vanishing point, the smaller they become. So let's add some value to our pumpkins. I've got a yellow in my hand, and I'm going to, in each section of my pumpkin, I'm going to add a little bit of yellow. And I know you're like, what? Pumpkins are orange. But you see, I'm going to go over all of my pumpkins with orange and a little brown. Why would I color a pumpkin brown? Brown pumpkin? What? Hang tight, because I want to show the value And value is the lightness and darkness. And don't worry if they're not perfect. Or don't worry about if yours are more perfect and more round than mine, because you should have your own style of drawing, your own style of doing things that suits you and makes you excited. And I know our pumpkins need some vines and some leaves. We're going to use our knowledge of line and we're going to add those. But let's get our pumpkins patched up here. So I'm adding some yellow, and I may not have added as much yellow the first, but that's okay. You can have some sunshiny pumpkins to start. Actually, I've seen all kinds of colored pumpkins this year. I love those green pumpkins. I don't know if I've told you that or not on the video, but I love the green pumpkins. Those are so cool. They're kind of a greenish gray. It's very, very neat. All right, so now I'm going to go in with an orange. And I want to leave, let me start with this big one down here. I want to leave a little bit of the yellow in the center. Or I'm just going to go lighter over that yellow in the center, because I want my pumpkin to show that it has different places of value, different places where the light hits it differently. All right, so I'm following my lines that I drew for my pumpkin. All right, and leave that yellow in the middle. Does anybody like pumpkin pie? No, I do like pumpkin pie. I don't make it straight from fresh pumpkin. I get the canned pumpkin at the store, but I do like pumpkin pie. I even like pumpkin pie when it's not in season. It's just a nice, yummy comfort food. Alrighty, and we're going along here. That's something that's special about this time of year. Is lots of different foods that are special to the fall, especially if you get closer to Thanksgiving. Ooh, don't worry, we're going to do some still life of food, just to practice drawing our shapes and combining the principles of design, which we're learning about next. Yes, I like certain Thanksgiving foods, don't you? Except mashed potatoes. I don't like mashed potatoes. I know, don't start yelling at me. I know, it makes me different. I don't care for mashed potatoes. Lots of people love them. But me, it's not my thing. I think it's the salty part of it. I don't know. I like French fries. And I like baked potatoes. I love sweet potatoes. But mashed potatoes have never been my thing. You can also press harder with your orange along the outside, along the lines, to make it stand out. Okay, so we've got our pumpkins colored, and if I want to, I can take a brown. Let's see here, this will do. And I can go just on the lines. Don't have to color the entire inside of my pumpkin, but just on the lines that I drew. Making sure I'm checking my computer screen, make sure I don't freeze up, to make them stand out. And then while I have my brown in my hand after I do this, or you could do it as you go. Oops, I got that one colored a little too close there. I'm going to color my stems. But as you can see, I could have put a few more pumpkins closer to my barn. You could do that too if you wanted to. But you don't have to. Alrighty. All right, so we've got our pumpkins in. We can go back and we can color our stems in brown. And then what we're going to do after we do this is we're going to put in our vines. We're going to practice our lines. And I would even add a little bit of dark brown to go along with this brown that I chose, just to show some value with it. So I would even go through, I won't do them all right now, but I would just take, see how that looks, how nice that looks if you take a little bit of brown and add it, darker brown and add it, just makes them pop. I'm not going to do it with all of them right now, but you could do that, certainly. Okay, so let's talk about our lines. You want to draw some vines on our pumpkins. Okay, so I'm going to make some curvy lines coming out of my pumpkins. And you could connect them some way if you'd like to. But again, the further back you go, the smaller your lines will become, and they don't have to look exactly like my lines. They could curve around. And then I'm going to just add the leaves when I color my vine. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. But as you see, the further I am away, the smaller my lines become. All right, so I've got those in. And then I'm going to go ahead and we're going to color our ground in as well, but I'm going to go ahead and do color my leaves and my vines. So I've got a green. If you wanted to use a brown or a darkish brownish green, you could do that. Sorry, I'm distracted. Asparagus. I'm gonna have to use asparagus, even though these are pumpkins, just because the name just got me. All right, and I am going to add some color to my vines. And as I go, I'm going to add these little teardrop shapes for my leaves. And I'll go, you don't even have to add a leaf to every single one. I'm going to go back and we'll fill in the color of those later. Yay. If you don't trace your lines perfectly, don't worry about it. Because once we color the background, you will not notice it. Going a little fast here. I should probably slow down a little bit. Sometimes when my brain gets going and I'm drawing, it does not keep up very well. You ever do that when you're writing and maybe your handwriting gets a little messy? Yep, I do that too. Sometimes when I'm drawing, I don't like to do it all at once either. Like I draw for a little bit and then I notice that if I go back to it later, I'm not so messy. So I've got, oh, I didn't do this one. And I noticed, if you notice, I just did the outline of my leaves because I want to go back in a different color to show value, and this is just a regular green. You know what, I don't like the regular green. I'm going to use a dark, that doesn't go well with asparagus. This one's called forest green. I think maybe that will work a little bit better. And then I'm going to color in my leaves. And I would even add a little bit of yellow green or yellow to your leaves to show the value. So they stand out. I just did these little teardrop shapes for my leaves because that was the That was what I was feeling would be the, oops, I left one out. This one's going to have forest green vine. Told you. I think that'd be a great job naming paint or naming crayons. Coming up with the names for this. That'd be so much fun. All right. We're almost done here. And then we're going to do our field. And remember, if you like doing that folk art look to your work and you wanted to have your pumpkins or your picture be much different than mine, not as realistic looking, that's okay. You can even add a, it would be pretty, a rainbow. Put a rainbow up here in the sky. I like that. I may not have time to do that though. We'll see. All right, so for my field, you know, if you wanted to do a field that was green, you could do that. If you want to do brown, that's okay too. I think what I am going to do, so my pumpkins kind of stand out, is this nice, I'm going to start with a, well, that's tumbleweed. I kind of like that name too. I'm just going to use a brown to get started, and I'm going to go over my frontal lines. These are called frontal lines. They also have another fancy name called horizontal lines, but I call them frontal lines. Oh, I forgot vines. I forgot a vine. Ah! Little pumpkin in the background there. So you ever heard of, if you see on a door on a car, objects may be closer than they appear? This is kind of like that. Kind of. All right, if you want to do these up here, you can as well. I'm really digging that rainbow idea. Wouldn't that be a lovely picture to see a rainbow in a pumpkin patch? I like it. All right, and then I'm going to color in my field. And I might even go back then in later and with that darker color, and then let me show you. And then just to the edges here, make it a little bit darker like that so it stands out, showing the value. Value is very important. Now around your, I missed the leaf here. Around your lines for your pumpkin, just color carefully around them, okay? I went ahead and put them in, because sometimes if you color over a dark color, sometimes if you press really hard and do a really thick, if I were to color, gone ahead and colored in brown for that, I wouldn't have been able to draw my lines as well. Sometimes if you color over a crayon, it won't do that as well for you. Same thing with colored pencil. And marker, I would definitely go ahead and put them in, because they may not show up. Okay, so I'm going in, I'm coloring in my field. And coloring around your pumpkins. Who has a garden? May like to garden? I don't grow any vegetables or fruits or anything like that, but I do have flowers that I grow in the spring. I've always wanted to grow a pumpkin patch though. I missed another leaf. Actually, that could have been a loop in my vine. And here I go shaking my table again. I need to find a table that's not so wobbly. As you certainly seen my table shake a lot. See, I'm taking my dark brown and I'm going along the edge. In a circular motion, or I try to circulate because it makes it stand out a little bit better. All right. And then you can continue. You know, if I were to put a rainbow in the sky, you know, if you look at a rainbow, it's usually like when you see it in the sky after a rainstorm, it's not very bright. It's like a pastel color. It's like a pastel rainbow instead of primary red, yellow, orange, and so on. And that's because it's a light. Rainbows are light being reflected. So if I do put a rainbow in here, that's what it's going to be. And it'd be really cool to put a rainbow here, since that's, you know, the colors. The color wheel was one of our elements of art. I've seen more rainbows this summer or this season than I ever have. So I like to go for a walk in the evenings, and I always see a rainbow at some point. I've taken pictures of them, all of them, almost all of them that I've seen this year. And I love the ones that are the arched rainbows that go all the way across the sky. I don't know if I would do that for this picture. Oh, that would look nice. I would have maybe done the clouds differently though, if I would have done that. The next time you look at a rainbow, really pay attention to that. It's like they're like pastel colors that you see, not bright colors. You know, whenever you're coloring with a colored pencil or a crayon, try to turn it as you go. Like I just turned this pencil, especially if it's a color that you're using a lot of, because it keeps the point from getting too worn down, and then you have to sharpen it. If you keep turning your pencil or turning your crayon, that will help you keep a point to it. We're almost done here. And if you want to go back and do this with the dark brown, that would be great. You could even add you could add any type of vegetables. If you didn't want to do a pumpkin patch, you could have done any other type of veggie in your garden. You know, so we'll be revisiting this again, drawing in perspective, because a lot of times for drawing in perspective, we think we do cityscapes. We do buildings on either side. And we're going to talk about buildings and architecture this year, so don't worry. We might even save that for 2-point perspective. But now you've done a 1-point perspective of a pumpkin patch. All right, and like I said, you can take your darker brown and darken those lines a little bit more so they stand out. And then if I were going to put a rainbow in this lovely picture, in my pumpkin patch, what I would do, and I might just do it so that it's coming across the sky right through here. What I would do, I would pick, like I said, some pastel colors. I wouldn't do red. I would do pink. I'd do pink. I might do light blue. Might do a pastel. Get that in right order, Mrs. Spinagle. And end it, I might pick that. Okay, so there's, if I were going to do a rainbow, I would do a pastel colors to make it a little more realistic. And then where you put it is up to you. So I might, and I'm going to do this really lightly. I might start with my pink and go across like that, really lightly. Now, I'm going to take my orange, and then, is this the right color orange? Yeah, I'll do that one. And I'm going to kind of overlap it a little bit with the pink. Because if you look at a rainbow in the sky, the colors kind of touch. And they kind of blend right into the other. Then I'm going to take my yellow, and I'm going to put it kind of right beside that orange, and it's like it's right in it. I might even go back in and take the orange and make it a little bit darker. I'm going to take my green, stick that in there, and then my blue, since my sky's blue is maybe not going to show like a brighter blue, and I'm going to put that in there as well. I'm going to put my indigo, or my purplish color for indigo, in there beside the blue, and then my violet. Right, and your rainbows don't have to be perfectly arched, but I actually saw a rainbow like that this summer that was just kind of hanging in the clouds, like it was spilling out of the clouds. So there you have your 1-point perspective pumpkin patch, our directed drawing. We have our vanishing point or horizontal line or horizon. Our objects are going from larger to smaller the further away they are from us. These are our frontal lines that make up our field. I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. And then even my sky, my clouds are larger the closer they are to me, and the closer to the vanishing point, they get smaller. And I even used form to make my barn and silo. So that is my pumpkin patch. I look forward to seeing your pumpkin patch as well. And remember, you should always sign your work and date it. Always sign and date your work. Okay. And there you have it. There is your 1-point perspective pumpkin patch. Lots of P words. Okay. All right, friends, that was our review for the first 9 weeks. Wow, we made it 9 weeks. One down, 3 more to go. Okay. So have fun doing that and sending them to me. I hope you have a super week. Make good choices, be safe, and I will talk to you next time. And Mrs. Bittner from Shepherd will have a lesson for you on space and drawing in perspective a little bit more. So I will see you next time or talk to you next time. Until then, be well.